Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. All right, well, 2022 is going to be a critical year for America. AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, along with their nearly 2 million members. The fight to stop out-of-control spending in the president's Build Back Better scheme is far from over, and Congress is plotting more legislation that could hurt our seniors. The midterm elections will be a battle for freedom versus socialism. Unlike liberal groups, AMAC is America's conservative, action-oriented 50-plus organization fighting hard every day here in Washington and across the nation for our seniors. So I'm urging you to choose AMAC now. You will receive all of the great membership benefits, including AMAC discounts on hotels, travels, and restaurants, and your membership will support your conservative values. So go to amac.us/Ellis. That's amac.us/ELLIS to become an AMAC member now.
As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and make sure that you are subscribed wherever you are listening or watching this podcast, Rumble, YouTube, or wherever you stream. We're on Apple, Spotify, all of the different channels. You can go to thejennaellisshow.com, and you can also connect with me there because I get a lot of questions and a lot of different topics that you want to hear about, and I love hearing from you because that can drive a lot of the answers that I would like to provide on this show. This is especially a forum where we can engage some of the critical worldview questions, not just in law and politics, but especially in faith. And one of the major conversation topics that we're addressing is what is the next step for conservatives and especially faith-based Christians in the pro-life landscape. So this is a conversation I've been really excited to have with my good friend, Father Frank Pavone. So Father Pavone, thank you so much for joining me today.
Jenna, I've been looking forward to this as well, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. And, we have been partners in this battle for years. You have definitely been a frontline warrior on this topic for a long, long time. And thank you, first of all, for your service, for your engagement, because I wish that so many more Christians would be as engaged as you are in the evangelical and Catholic conservative fight, because this is so important that faith-based Christians engage these issues. And we don't just sit back and talk about them in the four walls of our churches, but we actually go out into society and win hearts and minds and engage and affect policy. So, you and I have been members of, the Trump surrogates and those types of coalitions and those teams. And, from where you're sitting, from what we've been looking at since 1973 and Roe versus Wade to now, this overturning of that case and the return to the states and their elected representatives of the issue of abortion, this is a huge win, but what does it look like now on the individual state by state landscape?
This is a big win, and I've been telling people that for those of us that have been fighting against Roe v. Wade for almost 50 years now, this is a testament to two things. Number one, the faithfulness of God. He's answering the prayers and sacrifices of so many people over all these decades. And number two, it's a testimony to the resilience, the strength of our American system of government, that we can correct such an egregious error and that we can do so, relatively speaking, in a peaceful, orderly way. Obviously, people on the other side are going berserk, but they always do that anyway. The point is, we're able to correct these big mistakes, and we therefore start with that. It's a time to celebrate. It's a time to thank God, and it's a time really to enjoy the fruits of the very kind of engagement that you're talking about. Because you look back and you say, well, what brought us this victory over Roe v. Wade? Well, for example, we worked hard, my team and I and so many people, to elect George W. Bush back in those days. And again, the Supreme Court was on the minds of a lot of the voters. And lo and behold, and he in his second term gave us Justice Alito, who authored this opinion, and of course Justice Roberts, who concurred in the judgment. Then you had, of course, the miraculous landmark election of 2016, and without President Trump, we would not have had this victory. Those three justices that he was responsible for placing on the court, but also the Senate Republicans who worked so hard to, for example, get rid of the filibuster for Supreme Court justice nominations. And had they not stood firm and then stood behind, for example, Justice Kavanaugh in that tumultuous confirmation process. In short, so many people did so many things, and so many voters had the Supreme Court in mind as they voted for President Trump, that this argues for engagement. It argues for the fact that although the results may be down the road a little bit, you get engaged, and you get engaged with the right perspective and motives, and you're going to see the fruits of your labor.
Yes, and as you were speaking, Father, it reminded me of that old sort of story that of course, is fictional, but it elucidates a really important point where a person is in the midst of a tragedy where they're trying to escape with their life, and they're praying, God, please come and save me. And there's a flood, and someone comes by with a boat, and they say, hey, jump in, jump in. And the guy goes, no, 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 I'm praying for God to help me. And then there's a helicopter that comes and says, hey, come on in, grab the rope. And the person goes, no, 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 no. I'm waiting and I'm praying for God to help me. And then there's, a couple other instances like that. And ultimately, the man dies and he drowns, and he goes to heaven and asks God and says, I called upon you. Why didn't you save me? And God says, I sent a boat, I sent a helicopter, I sent all these things,
Right.
and you didn't grab on. And it's a reminder that we sometimes expect something completely miraculous, but we don't take the time to see how God is actually intervening in very important ways, and that we need to be engaged among our fellow citizens. And we need to
Right.
say, let's take a hold of the tools that are at our disposal right now. And we need to be
Right.
engaged in politics and in policy and on the ground with voting, and making sure that we elect people who will represent life in the state and local level and on the federal level. And if we're just sitting back and we're praying, God, please protect all of the unborn children, please, help this country be free, but we're not doing our part to engage that and use the tools that he has given us, the blessings of liberty, then we're praying without really understanding that God has already given us so much of an opportunity to engage that outcome. So I
Well,
think
you know what?
go ahead.
What people are doing in that instance is engaging in wishful thinking. It's
Right.
just wishful thinking. Oh, Lord, I hope we have a better world, give us a better world. And it's like, if we get theological here for a moment, we're talking about the mystery of the incarnation, that Almighty God literally jumped into our history by taking on human flesh and blood and a human soul in Jesus Christ. And if that doesn't argue for engagement, God himself could have saved us with a wink and a nod, with a spiritual, outpouring of some kind. But no, he took on flesh. He jumped into our world. He jumped into our work. He jumped into our suffering, and he jumped into our death. And then he took humanity back up to the throne with him. So that, just the incarnation, that Christians really believe that God became one of us, that he's not just watching us from a distance. This is the ultimate argument for engagement on the part of Christians. And when I talk to people about prayer, I point out to them, when you have prayed, you shouldn't feel like you've done your duty. You should feel like you've been given your duty. You shouldn't feel rested. You should feel restless, because prayer is union with God, and God is the source of all good activity and labor and engagement. So that is the trap that many fall into. The best of things can be abused. The best of things can be used as an escape from what God really wants us to do, and that includes prayer. And we can't use prayer as an escape. We can't use faith as an alternative to action. And what you're saying is just, it's exactly what people need to hear. I always think of Martin Luther King Jr., and our mutual friend Alvita has worked with me for many, many years in this very same arena. And her uncle Martin Luther King said, "Look, we need a relevant ministry." This was the talk he gave on the night before he was assassinated. He says, "We need a relevant ministry. We can talk about the New Jerusalem, but God's people have to talk about the new New York and the new Los Angeles and the new Memphis, Tennessee." So it's that theology of engagement that is more essential today than ever.
Absolutely. And, we've seen and we've heard this lie of a separation of church and state for so long, saying, well, our faith has to be just relegated to the four walls of the church, if that, because we've seen the secularists want to come in and say to the pastors, you can't teach certain things, or you have to affirm certain things that fundamentally go against scripture and the tenets of our faith. And so, as we are looking at engaging more, what are some practical ways now that this life issue is now really a 50-state battle? And we know
Yeah.
that it'll be a lot easier in some of the red states, but in blue states like, New York and California, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So, for people maybe in those states, or who are looking at New York and California and saying, well, that's never going to change, what are some practical things that we can do to advance this argument?
Okay, so the reversal of Roe v. Wade, people need to understand this has changed things everywhere, including in the blue states. How has it changed things? It's taken away the foundation, which was a falsehood, namely that the Constitution contains some kind of right to abortion. It's taken away the foundation of so very many, not just Roe and Casey, but so very many decisions that have been made both in the federal courts and on the state courts that have been the underpinning of the advancement of the abortion industry. So now, even in places like New York and California, I was recently speaking to some pro-life groups out in California. I'm going there again in the next couple of days. And they were telling me, oh yeah, Gavin Newsom, he said our state is going to be a sanctuary for abortion. And I looked at them and I said, whether California is a sanctuary for abortion is not up to Gavin Newsom. It's up to you. The people have the power to change things. No state is permanently blue. No state is permanently red. Things can change. Things do change. And it gets changed by what we were just talking about, active engagement. So the first thing that changes, Jenna, is the discussion itself. Just as in the courts, the idea that there's a constitutional right to abortion was short-circuiting adequate airing of the evidence, adequate taking into account of the interests of the state. Look at the development of science, for example. We know more about the baby, et cetera. All that was pushed aside because, there's this constitutional right to abortion. But now the argument opens up. it can breathe, it can have its impact. Well, the same thing is true around the dinner table. The same thing is true in
Mhm.
the workplace. I mean, people are talking about the issue, and the conversation doesn't have to get short-circuited now by somebody piping up and saying, "Oh, but there's a constitutional right to abortion." Hold on a second. Abortion supporters, and even in the bluest of states and the most pro-abortion places, can no longer hide behind the robes of the justices. They've
Mm.
got to stand up and make the case on its merits. Why is pulling a baby apart in the womb a good thing? Why should it be allowed? Why should we resort to this? They've got to make the argument now on the merits. People, even in these abortion strongholds, are going to begin to notice that they can't get away with this so easily anymore. The legislators, the same thing. So many legislators, they were all too content, weren't they, to say, "Oh, well, the Supreme Court has taken this out of our hands." It was
Mhm.
not good for democracy, but it was convenient for them.
Yeah,
It was
isn't it
pretty
amazing?
inconvenient,
Isn't it
right?
amazing how so many state legislators are so happy when the federal government takes it out of their hands, where they should be
Right.
saying, wait a minute, this is a state issue, and they should have continued to legislate on this well before now and
Yeah.
continued to challenge that faulty assertion that there is a constitutional right to abortion. And that goes back into our responsibility to select and prefer the representatives on the state and local level in the governor's mansion and in the legislature that will understand state
Mm.
sovereignty. They'll understand federalism, understand the separation of powers, and be willing to act on it.
Yeah, exactly. And acting on it with the wisdom that the American people have always exercised on these issues. The court in Dobbs acknowledged, as you know, the multiplicity of arguments on both sides, and the need to weigh and balance various considerations, various rights, various interests of the state, the rights of the woman, freedom, the rights of the baby, etc. And the court basically looked at this and says, why should we 9 justices be the ones to decide all this and sort through all this? Let the people weigh and balance and make the proper determination that they think is appropriate. And that's such a wise decision. But what that then means is now these elections have more impact even than they already had for the direction our country is going to go. I don't think, Jenna, that the Democrats are going to get any electoral benefit from the fact that Roe has been reversed. They might hope, and they're trying to gin up the base. Biden says, "Oh, Roe is on the ballot. Roe is on the ballot." You know what? Roe has been on the ballot for a long time, and the
Mhm.
people have shown, election after election has shown that pro-life is a winning issue. More people are motivated to vote by being pro-life than being pro-choice. So the statistics have shown this, sometimes by a margin of 2 to 1. You look at that segment of the electorate that says the candidate I vote for has to share my view on abortion. You take that portion of the electorate, it's pro-life 2 to 1. So the Democrats are not going to get any benefit out of this, especially if they keep pushing the idea of unlimited abortion without restrictions. I mean, the American people have never been supportive of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're talking, Father, about this issue is now going to be debated and discussed on the merits, that is so incredibly important. And even around my own dinner table over this past weekend with the 4th of July and Independence Day, I was talking with my sister in law because she actually teaches an apologetics class to other moms, and she calls it Mama Bear Apologetics. And it's so great. And I'm
Mm,
so proud of her for that. And she was saying that this discussion is really paramount, even within the moms in her class, saying, okay, we're talking about this issue now finally, and we're
right,
not just having this kind of brushed aside as, well, it's been decided, it's super precedent, we can't
right.
touch it, all of those things. And so, we have this conversation of, okay, how can we defend the pro-life argument? But even more than that, we need to turn it around and say, how can leftists defend their argument for abortion? Because it's very easy actually to defend pro-life. It's very easy to say, look, this is a human being. It's not, it may be a much smaller human being than the rest of us. It may be in an early stage of development, but there's nothing else that an unborn child can be except a human being made in the image of
Right.
God. It's not a dog, it's not a cat, it's not a bell pepper, it's not anything else, it's a human being. And so really the most difficult argument that she suggested a lot of people are having trouble responding to, and I'd love to get your take on this, is this
Mhm.
idea that women say, well, the government can't force me to carry a child to term because the government isn't in control of my body. So the government can't force me to carry a child and to be basically used, quote unquote, for pregnancy. What's your response to
Yeah.
that argument?
There is a lot of validity when people start arguing that the government cannot force certain things on our bodies. There is bodily autonomy. We believe in that. There is privacy. We believe in that. We even believe in reproductive rights. What we have to notice, and even Roe and Casey, as you know, and other decisions acknowledged this, there is a unique situation when it comes to abortion. Unique, because now we have one person living inside another. So the baby obviously is not the mother's body. Okay, no human being has four hands, four legs, a different DNA, blood type, et cetera, et cetera. All the biological arguments make it clear, and common sense tells us this is a different body. So I say to people when they start arguing from the point of view of bodily autonomy, I say, yeah, we believe in that. When does your bodily autonomy start? I think it starts as soon as you have a body.
Mm-hmm.
The baby inside you has a body. Does that baby have the same bodily autonomy that you're now invoking to kill that baby?
Mm-hmm.
Yes or no? So that creates the uniqueness of the abortion situation. And therefore, one has to begin the analysis. All right, can the state impose a temporary inconvenience? Because obviously, yeah, it's an imposition. It's the same imposition that you give to a mother of a born child by telling her you can't throw your baby in the lake.
Right.
That's not an option. You don't want to raise the baby. Okay, there's a few other options you can take. But you can't throw the baby in the lake. So the uniqueness of the situation, one person inside the other, needs to be brought home. So many people, let's take on a very common sense level, even very pro-life people, I hear them talking this way. When somebody's pregnant, say, oh, I'm going to have a baby, or have a baby on the way.
Right.
On the way from where? The baby is there already. If you're pregnant, the baby's there already. And it's this fundamental awareness that we're not talking about. See, if we were talking about the choice of whether to bring a child into the world, or whether, again, as many of the court's language talks about, the decision of whether to bear or beget a child, again, we believe in reproductive freedom. We don't believe the state should be dictating to parents whether or not to have a child or how many children to have, like we have
Mm-hmm.
problem with the Chinese government doing. Okay, but it's not a question of whether to bear or beget a child or whether to bring a child into the world. It's a question of whether you can throw a child out of the world. So
Yeah.
it all comes down to the original initial framing of the question. And
Mm-hmm.
that is key to the question you raised and to a whole bunch of other arguments that the other side makes.
Yeah, and I think that's such a brilliant response and it's a truthful response. And my response to her as well along those exact same lines is that we do have to phrase the question differently, because when women are saying the government can't force me to bear a child, well, they're not, because that question presumes that it's the government forcing you to become pregnant at the inception of the child. What they're basically saying is that the government, as if a woman is saying, I'm fine, I'm not going to get pregnant, and the government is somehow forcibly causing her to become pregnant. That
Right.
would be an entirely separate question. And when we're talking about things, for example, like the vaccine, which is a different moral question and certainly not talking about the life of a child, but in the same way that conservatives advocated that the government can't forcibly inject you with a vaccine against your will, is the same type of argument. Because if you look at the status quo and say, okay, I am not vaccinated, and then the government is forcing me to become vaccinated, that's the medical
Mhm.
intervention that the government is compelling. But if a woman is already pregnant, however she came about being pregnant, and of course there are terrible examples of criminal activity like rape and incest, but however a woman became pregnant, that is the status quo. She is already carrying a child. And so the government is simply saying you cannot choose a medical intervention, because the intervention at that point is the abortion itself, because a natural course of life would either be that the woman carries the child to term and the child is actually born, or she naturally miscarries, which is a terrible tragedy as well. But both of those are natural outcomes. The medical intervention is the abortion, because the definition legally of an abortion is a medical intervention that is specifically designed to cause the death of the child. And so
Yeah.
it's actually the government restraining the mother from choosing a medical intervention that is unlawful, that is immoral. It is not the government actually compelling anything. It's not the government forcibly causing a change to the status quo. So I think we have to view this and answer these questions very differently, and not just presume that the way that the left is framing it is logically correct. And we have to say, well, wait a minute. We have to look at what is the government actually doing, because here they're simply restraining the woman from choosing an illegal, unlawful, immoral outcome. They're not actually forcing the woman to do anything. And so this
Right.
also reminded me of the typical law school hypothetical in criminal law, where you have a trolley car that there's a hypothetical of a trolley car that's barreling down the street of San Francisco and it's out of control. And however it came to be out of control wasn't, your fault, but you are on the trolley car and you have only one of two options. So it's a closed universe scenario for the purposes of the hypothetical. If you don't turn the wheel of the trolley car, then it is going to barrel down the street and kill 5 people that are in the way. If you intervene and you choose to turn the trolley car wheel, then it will necessarily kill 3 people. So the moral question and the legal question becomes, what should you do? What can you lawfully do in that scenario? Because it may seem that turning the wheel and saving the lives of 5 people is the better option, but without any intervention from you at all, then just that would naturally happen without any intervening superseding cause. And so the legal analysis here is, if you choose to intervene, you are actually causing the death of 3 people, where if you
Uh-huh.
chose to not intervene, you would not be responsible and the actual proximate cause of the death of anyone. And so that's how we need to frame the abortion question, that if women did not choose that medical intervention, a woman would not be responsible for the death of anyone. But
Mhm.
choosing a medical intervention, choosing to turn that wheel, then a woman is responsible for the death of the child or children. In the case of vacuuming out or taking out fertilized eggs in an in vitro situation, where some women say, I want to have, 8 eggs implanted and then I'll evacuate 5 and throw them away. That is actually a form of abortion. So we need to frame these questions in a better way. And so, Father, what are some other resources and things where people can learn about these types of not only legal but moral arguments to be able to respond to the left?
Well, Jenna, an overall place they can go is in our ministry. We've got endabortion.us, and we're actually a family of ministries at Priests for Life. And we're not just for priests, not just for Catholics, but the whole gamut of pro life activities. People can get involved and get that kind of information at endabortion.us. Now, we have, you were, as I was listening to you, hitting really the nail on the head, that the other side never describes what they defend. In speeches of pro-abortion politicians, you'll never see the words blood, skull, bones, flesh, decapitate, dismember, but you will see those words in the textbooks on how abortions are done. So we have a website, lookatabortion.org, and we say, look, this has got to be the starting point. Describe what it is that you're defending, so people can really have a powerful, powerful way of dealing with it there. And then there's the side of the woman. We have the Silent No More campaign. And so those that have been through abortions have been devastated by it, and have found healing and want to share their stories. We help them to do so. So silentnomore.com enables people to listen It's interesting because the pro-abortion side has been saying for decades, listen to the voices of women, right?
Mhm.
Now they listen to those voices, and what do they hear them saying? I regret my abortion. And here's why. So Silent No More is another great resource for people, and we want to provide the healing. And we do provide the healing and the forgiveness. People need to understand this is not a movement of judgment and condemnation. We
Right.
who oppose abortion do not oppose those who have abortions. Rather, we want to embrace them with healing and mercy and peace, and we do that every day. So, those are some of the resources. Silent No More, Look at Abortion, and endabortion.us. And I hope people will connect with those resources.
I do too, and that's so well said. That we are not a movement, a pro-life movement of condemnation or judgment, because a lot of women who have had abortions and regret their abortions are pro-choice, almost reflexively, because they think if I chose that and then I
Mm,
switch and become pro-life, then I can't be forgiven, or I won't be forgiven, or I will be judged. You look at someone like our good friend Abby Johnson, who is
yeah,
incredibly pro-life. She runs an amazing ministry. She's the subject of the movie Unplanned, that, as you
yeah.
described, describe what we're actually defending, the left
Right,
is actually defending. It's amazing that the entertainment industry will talk about abortions all the time, but they never show it. Even on
yeah,
shows, medical dramas that show all kinds of, like, very, I would say, really squeamish kinds of surgeries and things like
that's
that.
right.
They never actually show an abortion because it is so graphic. They know that people's minds and hearts would be changed if they actually
Im
saw what happened.
Imagine that. Imagine what would happen if Grey's Anatomy, for example, showed, the arms and the legs of the baby being pulled out and dropped into the metal tray. My goodness, what would that,
Yeah,
uh,
it would be a complete change of perspective from a lot of these people who are unwilling to look at what abortion actually does. And for people like Abby Johnson, who herself has had two abortions, and she's very
mhm,
open about that, she talks about the love of God and the grace and the forgiveness, because abortion and any other sin, any other choice that we regret, that we know is not of God, because that's all that sin is a it is to go against what God has said is good and right. And so there's nothing that we can choose that is so immoral and depraved that we can't be forgiven, because if we are of
right,
the opinion that abortion is the only thing that God can't forgive, then we're saying that our choice somehow is more powerful than the blood of Jesus Christ. And that is
right.
absolutely against the grace of and the truth of the gospel.
Yeah, it sure is. And I would be remiss too not to mention another resource. You were asking me about resources, prolifevote.com. We head up a very, very big election effort, which we were talking about earlier in this program, prolifevote.com. And I want to let me show you my hat. I got the Ultra MAGA hat.
Yes,
And
that's awesome.
there is a beautiful intersection, Jenna, as you know, between what is the great MAGA movement, the greatest movement in American political history, and the pro life movement. There's an
Mhm.
intersection, and we are working very hard at that intersection to help this great movement to have its particular effect on the unborn. And that's a big aspect, isn't it, of the greatness of America, is that we're able to protect the most vulnerable in America.
Absolutely. And we can make these arguments, and we should be making these arguments across the world. But here in America, we have the unique blessing of liberty that we, the people, get to select and prefer our leaders and actually influence politics and policy. We aren't just subject to, like the Prime Minister of Canada is issuing these edicts saying, well, we will always, support a woman's right to abortion, quote unquote. And,
Yeah.
some of these other dictators and
Yeah.
petty tyrants around the world, we actually can shape the morality of and the culture of our country, and that is a huge and amazing blessing that we need to take seriously and be
Yeah.
engaged and win hearts and minds, because ultimately politics is downstream from culture. And as I always say, we need to be fighting not just to make abortion illegal but unthinkable. So
Unthinkable.
closing thoughts, Father Pavone, and I really appreciate this conversation so much.
This is great. I enjoy this very much. One simple closing thought is this, and you started by asking me about faith, engagement of the people of faith. The reason this is so critical at this point in time is that you're talking about Republican versus Democrat, the elections, the divisions in the country. This is not just a difference in policies. There's always policy differences. This is a difference in principles. And when it's a difference in principles, is life sacred or not? Can you kill a baby or not? That's not a policy difference only. That's a difference in principles. There is no room there for neutrality for people of
Mhm.
faith. There
Yeah.
can be neutrality of the church not getting, taking on a political platform by definition. But this is definition for the church. These are gospel values. These are basic human rights. And there's no room here for neutrality, including in politics. We have got to get behind those who are standing up for the principles on which not only the gospel, but this great nation are based.
Mhm. So well said. No room for neutrality. So get involved, get engaged. Follow Father Pavone on all the social platforms, everywhere that you are speaking. This is wonderful. Give those websites again one more time.
Yes, endabortion.us is our main one, and silentnomore.com, lookatabortion.org, prolifevote.com, and they can follow me, Jenna, on social media at FR for Father, FR Frank Pavone.
Thank you so much, Father. Really appreciate it. And blessings to you in all of the endeavors for life and for the gospel that you make. I so appreciate your friendship.
Likewise, Jenna, God bless you.
Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. I also want to talk about another great American who is the sponsor of this podcast, and that, of course, is my good friend Mike Lindell. He has been canceled out of so many box stores for simply standing up for his own political opinion. And disagree or not, or support him or not, it is a fundamental right of every American to be able to voice their opinion, and that absolutely includes politics. That absolutely includes issues that are central to our culture. That includes faith. Mike is such a very sincere Christian, and I am proud to consider him a friend, and he is, of course, a friend of this show. So right now, there is a special on MyPillow.com. Click on the new radio listener specials. Get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including a great towel set, which is a 6-piece set. It includes 2 bath, 2 hand towels, 2 washcloths, made in the USA, regularly $109.99, now just $39.99, but you have to use the promo code Jenna. That's Jenna. That tells Mike that you listen to this show, you're happy that he is a sponsor of this show, and you will get great discounts, but use the promo code Jenna, that's Jenna, either at mypillow.com or call 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna.